Hello, welcome to the course PH5 BO6 Electrodynamics 2. The contents of this course is taken from Introduction to Electrodynamics by David J. Griffiths. We will continue to discuss topics from Chapter 9 Electromagnetic Waves. Today we are going to analyze reflection and transmission occurring at an interface between two linear media using electrodynamic boundary conditions. So assume that you have two linear media 1 and 2 and there is an interface between them and the wave is traveling along the z direction and the interface is along the xy plane perpendicular to the z axis. And for ease of analysis, let's assume that the wave is incident at 90 degree with respect to the interface. So this is the case of normal incident. So the incident wave is coming from medium 1 and a part of the wave is reflected back to medium 1 and the remaining part is transmitted into medium 2. Let's assume that we have sinusoidal waves here. So you know the geometry of a sinusoidal electromagnetic wave. If the propagation direction along the z direction and the electric field is along the x direction and consequently the magnetic field is along the y direction. And the amplitudes of electric and magnetic fields are related by magnetic field amplitude equal to electric field amplitude divided by wave velocity. So with these ideas we can quickly write incident, reflected and transmitted waves. For incident wave, EI complex equal to E naught I complex e to the power I k1z minus omega t x cap, where k1 is the propagation vector in medium 1. Similarly, BI complex equal to 1 over V1 E naught I complex e to the power I k1z minus omega t y cap. So this is for the incident wave. When it gets reflected, what happens? The wave travels in the opposite direction. In the previous class, I told you the wave vector gives the direction of the propagation, right? So when the wave is propagating in the opposite direction, the plus k1 will be replaced by minus k1. Okay. So the reflected electric field ER complex equal to E naught R e to the power I minus k1z minus omega t x cap. Okay. So electric field remains in the same direction. What about the direction of magnetic field? So propagation vector, electric field and magnetic field. These three together constitute a right-hand system, meaning cross product of 2 gives the direction of the third vector. So take cross product of these two vectors, it is in the minus y direction, right? So to indicate that for magnetic field, you put a minus sign here. So this is minus 1 over V1 E naught R e to the power minus k1z omega t y. What about the transmitted wave? From the diagram, you can make out that it is very similar to the incident wave, just that instead of medium 1, you have medium 2. So the equations are ET complex equal to E naught T complex e to the power I k2z minus omega t x cap, where k2 is the propagation vector in medium 2. And BT complex equal to 1 over V2 E naught T e to the power I k2z minus omega t y. So these are the incident, reflected and transmitted waves. We also know the electrodynamic boundary conditions. Epsilon 1 E1 perpendicular equal to epsilon 2 E2 perpendicular, B1 perpendicular equal to B2 perpendicular, E1 parallel equal to E2 parallel, 1 over mu1 B1 parallel equal to 1 over mu2 B2 parallel. So we have incident and reflected waves on the left hand side and the transmitted wave on the right hand side. For simplicity, assume that the interface is at the point z equal to 0. So at this point, the combined fields on the left. So if you take the electric field, you have EI plus ER this should join the field on the right hand side, that is ET. Similarly, the combined magnetic field on the left side, which is BI plus BR, should join the field on the right hand side, BT, in accordance with these boundary conditions. So we have two sets of boundary condition, one for perpendicular component and one for parallel component. A closer look at this geometry reveals that both electric field and magnetic field are parallel to the interface, right? There is no component perpendicular to the interface. So straight away you can disregard the first two equations here because we do not have any perpendicular component here. So let's stick on to the third and fourth electrodynamic boundary condition. Take the third condition. The total parallel component on medium 1 equal to total parallel component on medium 2. So in medium 1 I have EI complex plus ER complex. On medium 2 I have ET complex. Okay. So substitute for this, you get this equation, and we are talking about an interface at Z equal to 0. So put Z equal to 0, the K1Z term vanishes. So you have E naught I complex e to the power I minus omega t plus E naught R complex e to the power I minus omega t equal to E naught T complex e to the power I minus omega t. Exponential term is common, cancel that, you get E naught I complex plus E naught R complex equal to E naught T complex. Take the fourth boundary equation, 1 over mu1 into the parallel component of magnetic field in medium 1 equal to 1 over mu2 into total parallel component in medium 2. So you can expand this as 1 over mu1 B1 complex plus 1 over mu1 BR complex equal to 1 over mu2 BT complex. So expand BI, BR and BT, you can write it in terms of the electric field, and just like the previous case at Z equal to 0, the K1Z and K2Z component vanish and you have only the time dependent exponential function which is common on either side. You cancel that, then you get 1 over mu1 into 1 over v1 E naught I complex minus 1 over v1 E naught R complex equal to 1 over mu2 into 1 over v2 E naught T complex. Okay. So mu1 v1 is a common denominator on the left hand side. You can take it to the right hand side. So you get E naught I complex minus E naught R complex equal to mu1 v1 divided by mu2 v2. You can call this factor mu1 v1 divided by mu2 v2 as beta, and then the equation gets simplified as E naught I complex minus E naught R complex equal to beta E naught T. v1 and v2 you can write in terms of the wave velocity in free space. So v1 is c by n1 and v2 is c by n2. C cancel, you have v1 by v2 equal to n2 by n1. You can also write beta equal to mu1 n2 divided by mu2 n1. So now you have two equations, E naught I plus E naught R equal to E naught T and E naught I minus E naught R equal to beta E naught. You can solve this equation. First add these two together. So E naught R term gets cancelled. You have E naught E naught T equal to 2 divided by 1 plus beta into E naught I. What do you do? In this equation, substitute for E naught T. So you get an equation with respect to E naught I and E naught R. Rearrange the terms, you get E naught R complex equal to 1 minus beta divided by 1 plus beta into E naught. So you have a relation between incident field and reflected field here. Similarly, incident field and transmitted field here. We can simplify this further. We know that for most of the materials, the permeability is close to the permeability at free space. You can write mu1 equal to mu naught, mu2 equal to mu naught. So in this expression for beta, since mu1 and mu2 are essentially equal to mu naught, you can cancel these two. So beta becomes V1 by V2. Substitute for beta in these two expressions. You can do it for yourself. You will get E naught R complex equal to V2 minus V1 divided by V2 plus V1 into E naught I complex. Similarly, E naught T complex equal to 2V2 divided by V2 plus V1 E naught I complex. If you recollect the analysis done for waves traveling on a string, we have obtained exactly the same results for incident, reflected and transmitted fields. Here, when V2 is greater than V1, then you can see here there is a positive correlation between the incident and reflected field, meaning if you have a positive peak in the incident side, you have a similar positive peak on the reflected side. Similarly, a negative peak here corresponds to a negative peak here. In other words, the incident and reflected waves are in phase. On the other hand, when V2 is less than V1, this is a negative correlation, meaning a positive peak on the incident side corresponds to a negative peak on the reflected side. In other words, the incident and reflected waves are out of phase by a factor of pi. This is the relation written for the complex amplitude. So this is true for the real amplitudes as well. So we can write the real amplitude E naught R equal to V2 minus V1 divided by V2 plus V1 E naught I. Similarly, the real amplitude E naught T equal to 2V2 divided by V2 plus V1 E naught I. Or in terms of refractive index, you can rewrite the equation. Remember the relation V equal to C by N. Okay, so if you rewrite this equation in terms of refractive indices, you get E naught R equal to N1 minus N2 divided by N1 plus N2 into E naught I, and E naught T equal to 2N1 divided by N1 plus N2 into E naught I. So these are the relation between the incident, reflected and transmitted fields. Now let's ask the question, what fraction of the incident energy is reflected and what fraction is transmitted? Suppose you want to make a measurement of this. Can you measure the fields directly? No, you cannot measure the fields directly. Then what do? If you look at the light source, what aspect of the light you can measure? Of course, you can measure the brightness, right? And brightness is related to intensity. If you recollect the expression for intensity I equal to half epsilon V E naught square. So let's make a calculation of incident, reflected and transmitted intensities. After that, we can calculate what percentage of light is reflected and what percentage is transmitted. So quickly, the incident intensity is half epsilon 1 V1 E naught I square. This is in medium 1. IR, once again, half epsilon 1 V1 E naught R square. And transmitted intensity, this is in medium 2. So this is half epsilon 2 V2 E naught T square. Now the reflection coefficient is defined as the ratio of reflected intensity to incident intensity. So R is IR divided by II. So substitute for that, half epsilon 1 V1 is common. You can cancel that. You get E naught R divided by E naught I whole square. E naught R divided by E naught I equal to N1 minus N2 divided by N1 plus N2. So the value of R equal to N1 minus N2 divided by N1 plus N2 whole square. So this is the fraction of light which gets reflected. Coming to the fraction of light which gets transmitted. This is defined as transmission coefficient T, which is equal to transmitted intensity IT divided by incident intensity II. Substitute for IT and II. A half factor is common. You can cancel that. You get epsilon 2 V2 divided by epsilon 1 V1 into E naught T divided by E naught I whole square. Remember, velocity V equal to 1 over square root of mu epsilon. Or you can write epsilon equal to 1 over mu V square, or epsilon V equal to 1 over mu V. So from this you can write epsilon 2 V2 divided by epsilon 1 V1 as 1 over mu 2 V2 divided by 1 over mu 1 V1, or this is mu 1 V1 divided by mu 2 V2. Once again, mu 1 equal to mu 2 equal to mu naught. So you can cancel these two. You get V1 by V2, which is also equal to N2 by N1. So this factor is N2 by N1. And what is E naught T divided by E naught I? This is nothing but 2N1 divided by N1 plus N2. So you can write T equal to N2 by N1 into 2N1 divided by N1 plus N2 whole square, or equal to 4N1 N2 divided by N1 plus N2 whole square. So this is the fraction of light which gets transmitted into medium 2. Let's make a quick calculation. When light passes from air to glass, what fraction of light is reflected and what fraction is transmitted? Okay. So medium 1 is air, its refractive index equal to 1. Medium 2 is glass, its refractive index equal to 1.5. So you can substitute these values in the equation. So in R you write 1 minus 1.5 divided by 1 plus 1.5 whole square. This is equal to 0.04 or in terms of percentage this is 4%. So only 4% of light is reflected back into the air medium. Similarly, transmittance T equal to 4 into 1 into 1.5 divided by 1 plus 1.5 whole square. This is 0.96 or 96%. So 96% of light is transmitted into glass. You can notice an interesting relation here. R plus T is equal to 1. So the total reflected light plus total transmitted light. This is equal to the total incident light. So this is a universal relation. So you can make out when reflection increases, consequently the transmittance decreases. Or the vice versa, when reflection decreases, the transmission increases. Now I want to give you an assignment. When delta n increases, what happens to reflection? Delta n is the difference in refractive indices between the two media. So you can do it for yourself. So here delta n is 1.5 minus 1, which is 0.5. So you can choose another value. You can choose n2 as 2.5. Now delta n is 1.5. You make similar computation and see what happens to the reflection coefficient. Does it increase or decrease? Because this is practically important. There are situations where you need to decrease the reflection. For example, when you look at the glasses on your spectacle, sometimes you use anti-glare glasses, which essentially has decreased reflection. Or you have monitor screens which are anti-glaring in nature. There also you need to decrease the reflection. So how do you decrease the reflection? You get a clue for that from the answer to this particular question. So please do that as an assignment. Okay. So that's essentially about the chapter of electromagnetic waves. But before winding up, we had an unfinished portion. So when I talked about polarization of waves in general, I said we will discuss about polarization of electromagnetic waves exclusively once we are familiar with the geometrical aspects of electromagnetic waves. So it's time now to discuss about polarization of electromagnetic waves, or in particularly light. So as I said in the previous class, polarization refers to the direction of oscillation. So in light you have electric field and magnetic field. Since electric field is the dominant field, we talk about the direction of oscillation of electric field. So based on polarization, you can categorize light into polarized light and unpolarized light. In polarized light, the direction of electric field is well defined. For example, if you look at this particular picture, here the electric field is consistently along the y direction. Or here the electric field is consistently along the x direction. So this is what I mean by a well defined direction. In the case of unpolarized light, the direction of electric field is not well defined. For example, if you look at this particular picture, at different points the electric field is oriented in different direction. This is okay. Even if you take a polarized light, in some cases the electric field is oriented in different directions at different points. But the problem here is, suppose you find out the electric field direction at a particular point, you cannot predict in the next instance what will be the direction of electric field, or in the previous instance what was the direction of electric field. That also you cannot. So the predictability of the direction is absent here. On the other hand, in the case of a polarized light, at a particular instance, you will be able to predict in the next moment what will be the direction of the electric field. Similarly, you can tell in the previous moment what was the direction of electric field. So an unpolarized light is essentially a randomly polarized light. So this is represented by this symbol. Here electric field is oriented in all possible directions. On the other hand, a polarized light of this sort, this is polarized along the vertical direction, so this is represented by a vertical line. Similarly, a horizontally polarized light of this sort is represented by a horizontal line. Sometimes instead of having so many lines, people just represent unpolarized light with a cross, meaning you have more than one direction of oscillation for the electric field. There are three major types of polarization: linear polarization, circular polarization, and elliptical polarization. In the case of linear polarization, so what we have seen here is the linear polarization. Here electric field is confined to a single plane along the direction of propagation. So you can see here electric field is confined to a vertical plane here. So this is known as vertically polarized light. Similarly, this is horizontally polarized light. Let's take the most general case, that is electric field along a random direction. Right? So this red line is the electric field. This is along a random direction. You can resolve this into a vertical and a horizontal component. Right? So you can assume that the field consists of a horizontal field plus a vertical field. So it consists of two perpendicular components, a horizontal component and vertical component, which are in phase. What's the meaning of in phase? Both these components start together, they also peak together. That's the meaning of in phase components. What about circular polarization? Here also the electric field consists of two perpendicular components of equal amplitudes which are out of phase by pi by 2. So the resultant electric field rotates in a circle around the propagation direction. So if you look at this schematic, it's clear. The electric field, if you view along the propagation direction, it appears that the field is rotating in a circular fashion. In the case of a circle, radius is constant, whether it is perpendicular direction or parallel direction, the radius is constant. That's why we say that the electric field consists of two components of equal amplitudes and they are out of phase by pi by 2, meaning by the time one wave started, the other wave would have already peaked, right? If you look at this diagram, the 0 point of one wave corresponds to the maximum point of the other component. Now, depending on the direction of rotation, there are two types of circular polarization. One is right circular polarization RCP, where electric field rotates towards the right or in the clockwise direction as shown in this figure, or left circular polarization LCP, where the electric field rotates towards the left or in the anti-clockwise direction. So this is about circular polarization. The elliptical polarization is very similar to circular polarization, just that instead of rotating in a circle, the electric field is going to rotate in an ellipse. And what's the difference between circle and ellipse? In the case of circle, the radius is constant in all directions, but in the case of ellipse, you have a major axis and a minor axis, and their lengths are different. So here, electric field consists of two perpendicular components of unequal amplitudes which are out of phase by pi by 2. And the resultant field rotates in an ellipse around the propagation direction. Now the phase difference between the two orthogonal components, it need not be pi by 2. It could be anything except 0. For example, it could be pi by 3 or pi by 4. So if the phase difference is pi by 2, then the electric field rotates in an ellipse where the major and minor axis of the ellipse coincide with the x and y axis. If it is not pi by 2, then the major and minor axis of the ellipse will not be coinciding with the x and y axis. It will be slightly tilted. That's the only difference. What's the problem if the phase difference is 0? You can answer that from the definition of linearly polarized light. Right? In linearly polarized light, both the components are in phase. In other words, phase difference is 0. So if the phase difference between the two components in an elliptically polarized light is 0, it simply gets converted into a linearly polarized light. Similarly, in the case of circular polarization also, if the phase difference is 0, it becomes a linearly polarized light. How do we achieve that practically? You can use an optical component known as a waveplate. So basically, waveplate introduces a phase difference between the two orthogonal components. So you learn more about this in your optics course, but I'll just give you a gist of it. If you use a quarter wave plate, it introduces a phase difference of pi by 2. So you can convert an elliptically polarized light or circularly polarized light into linearly polarized light. Similarly, you have a half wave plate which introduces a phase difference of pi. So using this, you can convert a vertically polarized light into horizontally polarized light. Similarly, a right circularly polarized light into a left circularly polarized light. Sometimes the linear polarized light, instead of saying horizontal and vertical polarization, people talk about P polarization and S polarization. So you will see this terminology in optics or laser textbooks. Okay. So this refers to the incident surface or the plane of incidence. So what is that? So let's try to understand. Suppose I have an incident light coming from this direction. It is incident on a surface indicated by this blue surface, and a part of it gets reflected and a part of it gets transmitted or refracted. Now S polarization refers to the light where electric field is parallel to the incident surface. And P polarized light refers to light where the electric field is perpendicular to the incident surface. So this is the definition of P polarization and S polarization. There is also an alternative definition to P and S polarization. This is with respect to plane of incidence. What is plane of incidence? This is a plane which contains the incident wave, reflected wave, and the normal to the incident surface. So if you look at this geometry, this red plane, which is perpendicular to the incident surface, is the plane of incidence. Otherwise, the plane of your screen is the plane of incidence. So always remember, plane of incidence will be perpendicular to the incident surface. So you can redefine S and P polarization with respect to plane of incidence. So S polarization, here electric field is perpendicular to the plane of incidence. In P polarization, electric field is parallel to the plane of incidence. So you have two choices, either define it with respect to incident surface or define it with respect to plane of incidence. So by convention, people usually use the plane of incidence method. Okay. So when you learn about lasers and all, you will hear that lasers are typically S polarized because the laser rod is cut at Brewster's angle and all. Also maybe you will hear that mirrors work best with P polarized light. Okay. So these are essentially horizontal and vertical polarization defined with respect to a particular interface or a particular plane of incidence. Anyway, you will learn more about polarization in your optics course. So that's about the chapter electromagnetic waves. So if you look at our syllabus, we had two major portions. The first portion is about electromagnetism and electromagnetic waves. We have completed that. In the next class onwards, we will talk about the second portion, which is to do with circuit theory. So specifically, in the coming class, we will discuss about AC circuit or alternate currents. So see you. Thank you.